Yeah, it's Vampire Killer. It's Castlevania Bloodlines under a different name, and a slightly easier difficulty that I find a little bit better balanced and much easier to 1cc on its normal difficulty. Getting right into it. I skipped over the intro because there's no particular reason to do it, and I chose Johnny Morris for two reasons, one of which is that I think he attacks a little bit faster, and as a result feels a little bit more fun to play to me, and the other reason is that all the colors are a little screwed up when you play as a card instead. So, you know, you look at Morris, and you look at his health bar, and hey, it's a lesbian flag. How about that? I don't know. Funny to me, I don't know if it's funny to anybody else. Anyway, speaking of lesbians, how about, the history of vampires throughout society? I don't know where I'm going with this, actually. I sort of do. You know how, they say in the intro, it's supposedly Elizabeth Bartley. You probably know this by now if you've played any of these Castlevania games taken seriously for more than like 5 minutes, but yeah, that's a mistransliteration. It's a little bit funny that people say it is sort of identified as Elizabeth Bartley or whatever, but in Japan at least there's no real ambiguity there. And you'll notice I'm not really talking about the game here at all because there's not a lot to talk about. It's a lot like the original Castlevania, maybe a little bit easier because there's no panthers, this area doesn't have any bats. It's just, you go through it in almost the exact same way. Except this time you do not get the holy water, or as I like to sometimes call it, the bone-hurting juice, because the axe is just so much better. There are very few times in this game where you don't want the axe because it is able to do a lot more damage than the other options. It has a good range, able to hit like almost directly above you and to the side and everything. You've got some mobility with the whip. You can press up while attacking in the air, but in general, it's just like the axe is the best sub-weapon of the bunch that isn't the item crash, which we have for now, and now we don't because of those stupid bats. In previous runs, I was able to get through that just fine without taking any hit from the bats. You just gotta watch your timing a little bit, and that time I did not. Anyway, as I was saying about Elizabeth Bathory, like, you'd render that in Japanese almost the exact same way you render it Bartley. So if you're not super familiar with your historical lore, if you will, on vampires, you probably wouldn't recognize that, oh, that's supposed to be Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian noblewoman who was known to have killed a whole bunch of young women and girls in her time, some of which had apparently gone to visit her under the guise of like a sort of one-on-one finishing school kind of thing for lower nobility. It's interesting. I was doing the quick Wikipedia checkup, and the article has been, a lot more fleshed out than I remember. Back when I played this in serious about 20 years ago, maybe even the last time I played this even semi-seriously, which was about 1989. Although in that case, those would have been with Bloodlines, probably with save states as well. This was no save states, but, well, it's a little bit easier. It's not, for the most part, massively so. And I'll point out a lot of the instances as we go along. The first one was with that Hellhound mini-boss, I suppose. It's maybe a little bit more predictable in Japanese. Biggest difference, I think, is that when it howls, it doesn't break anywhere near as much glass, so it is a lot more feasible to dodge. And I feel like sometimes, because of how random it is, in the US version, even on normal, you can get patterns that are just completely undodgeable, and in the Japanese default, that doesn't happen as much. And trying to do a little thing here where I pick up the gem. That's how you do it. If you didn't know, you just kind of jump up there with the card, but kind of have to do some whip Tarzaning tricks with Morris to get him tall enough to make contact with it. More health. And yeah, outside of that one difference with the mini-boss, the one other big difference I can think of is that there are like 4 in the staircases right after the mini-boss. Get one up here. One of the things that's come up a little bit in the name of this challenge is because we want to try to do it one continue clear. You tend to want to be able to collect as many 1-ups as you possibly can. And there is one thing that can slightly screw up your 1-ups, which is that if you hit enough candles to get that powered up super weapon like level 4, it can overwrite the 1-up. There's like one 1-up in every level. So if that candle winds up ending up being the one that drops the level 4 super weapon, sub-weapon, I don't know what I'm saying. If it drops the level 4 whip or spear or whatever is what I should say. If it drops that, then you're kind of in trouble if you want to get more lives. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, and I've worked out at least a little bit of how many candles you need to whip in each area, depending on where you lose your sub-weapon. We're good, obviously, for this level, and losing it here isn't an issue for the next one either. Tried to swing into the orb, run invalidating because I didn't get that. Anyway, going back to lesbian vampires, it seems that Bathory herself was actually one of the inspirations behind the actual original, as far as we can tell, vampire novel, Carmilla, which came out 25 years before Dracula, even if it didn't quite get the same level of pop cultural recognition. That said, the funny thing is there is one of those Hammer films, the horror series that probably most directly inspired the ideas of the Castlevania games, even more so than like the Universal monsters. They do have a Lady Dracula film that seems to have been at least partly inspired by the mythos surrounding Bathory. And, you know, if you look up details on how Bathory, you know, kind of became a pop cultural figure, including the whole probably apocryphal claim that she would, like, bathe in the blood of her victims, which, you know, is sort of still, depending on how broadly you define the Castlevania series at this point, with its main creative director having left Konami to independently create that Bloodstained series. You know, still is influencing the series, maybe even more than it was before. But yeah, going back to Dracula, like, certainly there are some similarities with the mythos of Bathory and what showed up in the Dracula novel, but it seems like most people don't particularly think that Bram Stoker was very familiar with Bathory. Any information about her never seemed to show up in his notes in writing the novel, which would suggest to me that maybe some of those details are more directly inspired by Carmilla. Certainly he didn't get the idea from vampires, you know, like on his own. That had been a tradition for a while, and, you know, the question of how much of that is inspired then by Bathory, I don't know. Good question, like, indirectly through Carmilla. Yeah, this guy is pretty easy in any difficulty. You just gotta use side screen and hit him. There are faster ways to do it, where you just kind of hit him with the backswing of your whip, and then he'll stay where he was because he'll go like to the side that you're facing to get away from you, or opposite the side you're facing, I should say. And that was one of the most unfortunate jumps I've had with this guy. He almost never jumps where you are, so usually you just kind of swing around, get in between the spike ball of his weapon and him, go to town it. If he does jump, generally staying around where you are is the safest option, but in that case we got a really unlucky jump. Whip, whip, whip. This guy jumps, that he's going to land on you, the second armor here. Excuse me. Have a little bit of a seasonal allergy thing going on at the same time as this. Happened last year as well. And this is actually one of the more deadly early areas in the game, because if you fall off of the platforms, you'll take a lot of damage from the water. If you fall in and it's like above chest height. So you don't want to do that, and it's usually better to just take damage from the Medusa heads. They're a little less predictable, I think, here than in other places, because you do need to move around. And I don't think they spawn consistently based on where you are. The only thing I can tell that's, like, definitely clear is that they will spawn based on where you're facing. But it makes them a little bit trickier to get. So So yeah, a little bit more willing to take damage from the Medusa heads than I am from the water, especially because in the next area we're going to pick up some health anyway. You'll also notice this is one of those games where your hearts, or well, in this case gems, don't clear out in between levels. So we're already at 99 sub-weapon use, and even better, every sub-weapon normally is just one, whether it's the axe, the boomerang, which is actually a boomerang and not cross that they're just calling a boomerang, or the bone-hurting juice, as I mentioned earlier. Another difference, the boneheads, they might fire out a little bit more quickly. On US, they also fire out 3 bullets instead of 2. The timing winds up being ever so slightly different. When I was doing some trial runs with Bloodlines to see how I'd handle that, I did find that they had a tendency to screw with me a little bit more. And one of the other reasons I wasn't too worried about taking a little bit of contact damage from those Medusa heads is that's the meat in the water. There is not a ton to be said about the rest of this part of the stage. It is fairly straightforward. You just go in, you beat up the guy, and after you're done beating up the guy, stairs. Bone pillars are here. You have your easier time if you use a sub-weapon to take out those bone pillars, because they can't hit you while you're standing up, and you can't hit them at all while ducking, as you can see, unless you use that. And we have so much sub-weapon use that it doesn't matter. Now this guy here, he kind of stands around until the water drains out. So, great opportunity to get a few quick hits in. And since the homing weapon just fires right up after trying to take out most of his body, you get at least one extra hit out there. And try to avoid taking hits from the dropped rocks. I think that's another thing that's a little bit different in the US, is that there are definitely more rocks that fall, even on the normal difficulty. When he jumps like that, if you're on the ground, you will take damage. So watch out for that as well. And we're just going to go straight for the head. Goes down pretty quickly. Seem to have influenced a couple of enemies in Harmony of Dissonance based on that ending pose. And we're already 2 levels down. Nothing too crazy here. So far, if I had taken a death at any point up until this point, I definitely would have restarted the game, because we haven't been going for that long. It's been under 15 minutes. Really, there shouldn't be anything too difficult coming in from there. If I've screwed up, I've made and ruined that mistake already. Since there are only 6 levels, and if you don't die a whole lot, and you get the 1-up in every... excuse me. You have a very good chance of, doing the 1 continued clear. So again, that's why I like it. I think US normal throws out the little harpy dudes at a higher rate. They're very annoying, because they can be hard to hit. My thought is usually to do something like that, get them either with the side whip and then top whip, or top whip then side whip. When I say top whip, I mean like up diagonal whip, firing up. Sort of like that. Either do side then top, or top then side, depending on where on the map they are. Like if they're above you, you hit them with the up whip, and then you should be able to get them with the side whip. Alright, little reference to Castlevania 3 here. If you're playing on US normal, they got one of those peeping eyes at the bottom of the level. My recommendation is if you're trying to deal with that guy, probably best to get to like the middle of the staircase where there's a safe spot. You can move up and down a little bit to get out of the way of the peeping eye to hit him. He'll still stay floating mostly around you. You should make contact with that, and you won't have to worry too much about the projectiles. Okay, first real test of the game, believe it or not. I died on that spot far too many times because the controller I was pressing didn't recognize me as pressing up and right. And yeah, that's foreshadowing, by the way, because that's not the last time we got to do something like this. Yeah, this level is mostly platforming challenges. Mini boss. Believe it or not, as far as I can tell, the US version doesn't have any real difficulty change here. If you play on Expert, his pattern does get a lot more erratic, but here he mostly just kind of stays up. So if you're not jumping into his head, he's pretty easy to deal with, so I recommend, again, axe sub-weapon, just kind of fire it into him a few times and you're good. So this segment is another kind of platforming segment where you're haunted by the Medusa heads, and I think it's a little bit easier than the one in the previous stage, actually, because the level is constantly actually sinking, ironically. So yeah, if you jump up, like, almost as soon as you see the head, or maybe once it gets to its top point, you know, you usually don't get hit. And that was a really scary moment right there, where I got hit. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to be able to still land on the platform. I thought I'd finally despawn. Staying on the right side, I recommend it because that's the one-up. Alright, right there, that right side, the mirror to destroy everything. And, yeah, this next area is a little bit of a breather because there's not a whole lot of platforming. You can keep your distance with most of these enemies. And they're posted in places where they're not too hard to deal with. Again, it's really good to have the axe here to deal with the bats as they fly kind of close to you. You can usually take them out. Same with this mummy here that's above the stairway. He can and will fire some bandages that can stay on screen for a while if you're moving around here. Trying to avoid the bats, you can still wind up hitting the bandage that comes in, so I like to just deal with that guy. And the platforms, here's another significant difference in difficulty, because the dragon skeletons, or whatever they are, skeleton dragons, I don't know what you call them, they aren't anywhere near as actively malevolent here. They fly a little more leisurely, but they fly also a little bit more directly at you to begin with. In the US version, they'll circle around you and then kind of move in a lot more quickly. Once you learn the timing, again, not actually all that much more difficult. In fact, there are definitely times where I've had to worry about these guys in this version a little bit more, because they can more easily get in your way. So we'll see as soon as we transition into the side scrolling again from the top scrolling. See that guy? Or this guy, like, they just kind of stay there, and they're right where they will hit you. And this guy, not so bad. He's just coming to hover at us again. By the way, every third enemy drops a sub-weapon. I've picked up the axe here, but it's not actually very important. You don't... because you just get the axe right there, that candle is the axe. And we get the sub-weapon boost right before the boss, which is great, because then you need only 3 hits to interrupt him from a phase, and we've gotten our third one right there. Once that dude starts throwing projectiles at you, he is very hard to knock off, so you may want to just spend your time dodging him, rather than actually trying to get hits in at that point if you don't have the full-powered weapon. Yeah, because they'll hit you, the knockback can force you off, and you'll get an extra chance to hit him after he finishes with that attack, where he'll try to home in on you. And actually, one of the better fights I've had with that. Great to use a sub-weapon in that final phase, because that's all he does is just bounce around and try to run into you, and it's very easy for the tower's rotation to just kind of push you into him while you're attacking with your normal weapon. So using the sub-weapon allows you to really keep your distance when he gets close. Germany. Fun thing about this playthrough that you're seeing is that it's not actually the first 1CC playthrough of the game I did. I had actually, my first playthrough that I had recorded, I got 1CC, and then it turned out that I managed to not record the game, but apparently a static screen of Discord for whatever reason. I don't know how it managed to do that. And you can take a bunch of hits here. It's not a big deal. People like in that area to Revenge of Shinobi because there's all this stuff, throwing stuff from behind you. It's sort of like a combination of the first area of the Detroit level and whichever one is the military installation. Like, I think that's the one before the aircraft carrier. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I played Revenge of Shinobi. And yeah, it doesn't matter too much about taking hits here because yeah, we're gonna get rid of this guy first to just clear out all the enemies from the area. And now that we've done that, we're gonna go back up and we're gonna go heal. And then after we're going to go heal, we're going to go off to the other side, because the corner of this level is where the 1-up is. Believe it or not, there are actually 2 1-ups in this level, but I find the second one incredibly inconsistent, because you've got a platform, you've got to swing, not platform so much as do swing the whip across like the bottom of a bunch of those conveyor belts directly over a pit. As you can see, this jump is really tight. That's like the exact timing you need to be. You need to be just barely on the platform, and you just barely land on the next one. But you get the 1-up. So, since there's no other real challenge to this area, like it's probably the easiest 1-up in the game to get, because pretty much all of the other ones involve at least a little bit of danger. Or at least, maybe the one in the final level isn't so bad either. You gotta know what you're up against. It's very easy to screw that one up. Yeah. This is a little bit dangerous because it's easy to kind of jump off of these platforms and wind up colliding right into a skeleton. So that jump into the one with the spike ball is a little scary. Despite the fact that they've given you that meat in only the second area of the level, they don't really do it again. I don't think there's any more meat here on out, which feels a little weird to me. But this was also the level that was most clearly redesigned a few times. There is that prototype that was leaked, and you got that area with the wood in the background that almost looks like it's a level from Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures for the SNES. A little weird how that turned out. I don't think it was copied from it, but I can see why they went with, let's do a more standard clock tower. Even if it's probably like one of the weakest looking areas in the game, I don't think this is where the clock tower background. 2 frames of animation for everything. It's fine, I guess, but I don't love it. One of the harder one of those skeletons to whip, because these guys do have range. You don't want to jump into them, and it's hard to get into the position to hit him because you're always moving away from him via the platform. This guy, in comparison, not so bad. You can just jump in once he's walking away. This next section is a little bit annoying, not because the platforming is particularly difficult, but because the ghosts will get in your way. There's only the one in the Japanese version. I think there's a second in the US. Probably shows up around here. Yeah, easy to take out with the axe. I didn't really mean to trade the axe for my powered up sub-weapon, but to get it back, you just pick up another axe. So first thing Frankenstein does is he throws the swingy rip in a circle where you gotta stay back. Then he does it straight forward, in which case you want to get close and duck under him. And thankfully we were able to beat him quickly enough that he didn't do his third attack where he electrifies the ground.